Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am reunited with Brian Degnan. We were together over the weekend there, enjoying a right good Celtic weekend, Brian, and it's great to see you back on A Celtic State of Mind. How are you keeping, pal?
Oh, tremendous. It's great to be back on. I don't think I've quite came down for the weekend yet. It was just it was a kind of storybook weekend in terms of how it all fit together. And obviously for the regular viewers, I know we had the night with Tam Boyd on the Friday, night with Martin O'Neill on the Saturday, and then we put Rangers in their place on the Sunday. So I mean, as far as weekends go, and it's right up there. So I've not quite got the smirk off my face. I've been spamming the group chats with some of the pictures we get taken, just the some of the boys. So aye, tremendous, Paul.
If Carlsberg did weekends, it was one of
Right
the
up there.
ones. It was one of the ones. Here we go. Joe Hamilton's in the mood. It's Friday trips and hoops. Afternoon all, says Paddy Lavery. Always an absolute pleasure. And, you know, I am keen to get as many of you involved in the chat as possible. So keep the comments coming in. What we're going to be talking about today, we are going to be talking about Brian's experience of meeting the great Martin O'Neill and Tom Boyd, and obviously what the Sunday brought to Brian. And this week, there's a couple of interesting stories involving Celtic. We have the Juranovic chat in relation to how surprised he was that we brought in Alistair Johnson. We've also got an interesting take on Celtic's ownership by David Lowe, who has been on the show numerous times over the years. Good guy, David. And obviously, we'll be chatting about his fears and what he is feeling uneasy about, and various other things from Celtic jerseys, goalkeeper tops, and everything else in the world of Celtic. Mikey Johnson, perhaps playing for Ireland, all of that and everything else that you bring up, we will be talking about it. Here we go. Kate Matsu, I'm going to bring this up here. Ange Postecoglou is great in pursuit of ruthlessness. I think there is a ruthlessness about, and this will lead us into the Juranovic story first and foremost, Brian. There is a ruthlessness about Ange, but I think there needs to be at this level of the game. You cannot get over sentimental about players if you've got that goal, you know, in your focus and in your mind, and that's your goal. Sometimes players come and go. Doesn't matter how good they are. Would you agree with Kay Matsu? There's a ruthlessness to Ange Postecoglou, and do you need to have that?
I think there certainly is a ruthlessness about him, and I think that he's been very clear about that. I don't think he's made any sort of bones about it. I think he's been very, very blatant when he's spoken about how, you know, he's not the player's friend. He's there to do a job for the club and reward the people who gave him this opportunity and stake a claim to be remembered in history. I think one of his first interviews, he spoke about standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yes.
Which is actually true. And how does he achieve that? Well, how does anyone that's really successful achieve things? You have to be ruthless. And I think that what is important to distinguish is ruthlessness is a quality. And I think everyone in any walk of life that's really successful has to be ruthless to a degree. But that doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're arrogant or you're nasty or any of that stuff. It's just how he goes about his business. His priority is Celtic Football Club and making us the absolute best we can possibly be under him. And he doesn't care, you know, who he upsets doing it. He doesn't care how many players are there, how many players are going. It's all in the pursuit of success for Celtic. And actually, you know, Celtic as a club is bigger than any manager and bigger than any player. And I think Ange knows that. I think he gets that. And I think his message to players is very clear. And I think that's why I know he's spoken in the past about, you know, keeping players happy.
Mm-hmm.
People say, well, you need to keep players happy. And he's like, no, it's not my job. Not interested. And I kind of love that. I think it's just such a winning mentality.
Yeah.
And it's got to be infectious for the players under him.
Absolutely, Brian. I mean, I know sometimes his answers are quite cutting, and he's talking about, you know, making players cups of tea and buying flowers for their wives and all this kind of stuff. And I guess what he is focused on is that ultimate aim of success. And I say pursuit of greatness because I think he is standing on you know, that kind of platform at the moment, just looking at the greatness before him of, let's just say, in modern times, Martin O'Neill, for example, who we were with, obviously, on Saturday night. And I went on about the trophy hall that we have had since Martin's arrival. And by the way, that is linked into the David Lowe comments that we'll be talking about as well, because that wouldn't have been possible had we not had the takeover from Fergus. So I'm always loath to not mention Fergus McCann and the takeover as well, because that was the guy that saved the club, because we were staring down the barrel of a financial shitstorm, I think is the only word for it, Brian, to be fair. And we were 8 minutes away from receivership, and Fergus and his team saved Celtic. Now, Juranovic, he was talking about, obviously, the main reason he left Celtic for Union Berlin. He says he was a little bit surprised at the arrival of Alistair Johnston. He found out about the arrival during the World Cup, in which he faced Alistair Johnston. There's a great image of the two of them going for a header. He calls Celtic one true love. That's tremendous. He's just given the Celtic merchandising team a wee idea for a T-shirt there. And that then begs the question in relation to the ruthlessness of Ange's pursuit of greatness and his pursuit of success. If it means that a player comes and goes like Juranovic, there was no fallout there, or indeed Giakoumakis, where maybe the thought process of the player isn't fully aligned to the mentality and the thought process of Ange, then he'll move them on. Not a problem. Because what he's building like if you can imagine an engine, and one wee part of that isn't quite firing on all cylinders, Brian, he'll just replace it. And he'll replace it with someone who fits, which you've mentioned this before. That's when the recruitment strategy comes in. And that's when, you say to yourself, the recruitment strategy has been so much better since Ange has come in. Yeah, you're always going to get one or two and it doesn't work out. But in terms of the ratio, more often than not, it has worked out. And it worked out with Juranovic. He came, he saw, he won a few trophies. He moves on for big money and he can go. And you know what? You can imagine us playing Union Berlin at some point in the future. He'd get a great response, wouldn't he? A great response from the Celtic fans.
He absolutely would, and I think he said as much in his interview that he would love to come back and as a player. And he spoke about winning the trophy. He's like, we won it, he laughed when he said we, because obviously he's still got that mentality. Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of things you brought up there, Paul, and actually they all sort of tie in. So, looking at Juranovic's place in history, only here for 18 months, but that last season, Ange's first season, I don't think we will quite realise the importance of that until much further down the line, almost in the way that we go back to Martin O'Neill and his impact in the club. Obviously, he's not going to ever claim credit for the way the club's went since, but I don't think you can underestimate the sea change that happened in terms of belief, sort of standing of the club in European senses as well. Suddenly it became, this is a huge club. We always felt it was a massive club, but it's like, no, we're massive. And that sort of carried on, that mentality's carried on. And then you could go back even further and say that started with Fergus and saving the club.
Yes.
And I think with Juranovic, and again ties into Tom Boyd, but look, when Janssen stopped the 10, Ange coming in and won that title straight back after the COVID season. I don't think we can underestimate exactly how important that was. Now, we know the job was massive because of the rebuild, but actually getting it back and saying, no, you borrowed that, give it back, that's ours. Mm-hmm. I think Juranovic played a real key part of that, and he'll always be remembered and really fondly for that. Now, obviously, I'm delighted Ange never left after a season like one, but these things are really important. It's like even the League Cup victory last year, hugely important this year. If they had won it, does that then turn the tide a bit? But it's just that grip, and it's that ruthlessness, not only in terms of recruitment, it's that desire of no, we won't lose. That's not this club. That's not what we do. And that culture sort of seeped and built in. And I know we're going to talk about David Lowe stuff, but when you look at Fergus, and I think even still there's a pocket of fans that aren't quite willing to say he's a hero, but he absolutely was. He saved the club. And I think that I'm not comparing them here, so don't go nuts comment section, but I think when you look at, Fergus and Peter Lawwell have got a similar thing in that very business-minded, very successful businessman, not always the most popular of chaps, maybe don't get the most football decisions correct, but you cannot underestimate the influence in the club and how well we're run, which also ties into our, the esteemed gaffer across the road who was talking about finances again today, and pulling the excuse book out, which is something we just don't see from our manager.
No.
And that's because not only do we spend smartly, we spend when we need it, and we can spend because we're well run.
And we spend our own money, which is huge, But see the thing there, an absolutely brilliant point that you made there in relation to Juranovic and Giakoumakis, whereby we'll look back on that first season under Ange Postecoglou, right? And by the way, Ange was entitled many, many times to make excuses in that first season for all the different things that were out of his control, for all the issues that he inherited in terms of a squad that was threadbare. I mean, the reason we all know he went on to great things, but the reason Ralston played right back is he was the only right back at the club. That was the reason he got a game, and then he proved himself, and he gets the contract, and he's now an integral part of the squad. But that was because the squad was threadbare. Dane Murray makes his senior debut in a Champions League qualifier. That should not be happening at Celtic Football Club. So the excuse book could have been pulled out numerous times in Ange's first season. It never was, Brian. Never once did I hear Ange sitting there making any excuses about anything from finance to recruitment to anything. But the two players you mentioned, Giakoumakis and Juranovic, we will look back on those two and think, yeah, absolutely pivotal to that win that season. And then it's almost as if, right, you've done your bit, you can move on now, and you know what, I'm going to replace you, if not with a better player, but with a younger model, right? And it was the same with the ruthlessness again, with Beaton and with Rogic. It was like, yeah, we had loads out of the guys. We both know, I think, 8-9 years at the club, both of them. We got loads of games and loads of big performances, loads of success under those two guys. They were part of successful Celtic football teams, quadruple trebles a lot. But it was almost as if Andrew was like, you know what, I can squeeze what I need out of these two guys for the final for the final bit of their Celtic career, and then they're gone as well. And we needed their experience last season. Whereas by the time the new campaign comes in, and there's a galvanisation of the success that we've had under Callum McGregor, and you've got Joe Hart at the back, and Carter Vickers is playing out his skin every week at centre half. Then Ange feels confident enough that the experience we needed the previous season in Rogic and in Beaton, we can let the two guys go. And it's going to be a feature, isn't it? Season 1, we'll let Rogic and Beaton go at the end of the season. Season 2, both let Juranovic and Giakoumakis go. Next season, who knows who it's going to be. But, it's almost as if he's normalised that so that the impact isn't going to be as bad next season, because we know that's how he operates, Brian.
It's tremendous, and I think that's... It's always like respect is earned, it's not given. And with Ange coming in and making those decisions, he's got that credit in the bank now. And still, a very short space of time, just over 18 months, 20 months, he's been in the job. And yet, in any other campaign that I can remember, if we sell one of our star players, everyone goes bonkers. We're downsizing, we're selling on the cheap, this is rubbish, who are we going to get in? But when Ange does it, after that short period of time, we go, oh no, he replaced somebody, no problem.
Yeah,
and I think that's tremendous. And just on the Beaton and Rogic, what is kind of brilliant as well, and it goes to that thing of, Ange's sort of uncompromising, he's kind of ruthless, but the players are all fighting for it. He doesn't try and please anybody, and yet he pleases everyone. And with Beaton and Rogic, they had two of the best send-offs to a Celtic career I've ever seen. They got the chance to say goodbye. They had that really emotional game, and Rogic come off for Beaton, and they got that time, and the fans knew they were going. It was announced. It wasn't a surprise in the summer. It was wonderful. Not many players ever get that, and that was under Ange. So yeah, he's ruthless, but he understands the bond that this club and the players and the fans have. And again, I think it was Kev Graham and I were chatting, Kev Collin and I were chatting about it. And I'd said if Rogic and Beaton were to leave, which at the time they were still there, I said it's a storybook ending, because they've been there for a long time. They've had their up and downs. They've lost the title. They spend the last season getting it back, and then they walk off into the sunset. It's sheer Celtic romance, as I'm fond to say, and I think it was excellent.
Yeah, you're right. And, you know, when you look at the fact that, okay, so we're getting used to the way that Ange operates. So if we're going to be selling a Juranovic, okay, because we've got Alistair Johnson. Or if we let Giakoumakis go, that's okay, because we've got yet to be seen how the impact is that he's going to make. But it was the same with Rogic and Beaton. It's all right, guys, because we've got Moy in the building, we've got O'Reilly, we've got Hatate. So I think that softens the blow, because the contingency, the succession planning is always there when it comes to Ange Postecoglou. I want to touch on David Lowe's comments, because he's a man I've got a lot of time for him. When he talks about finances, you listen. Vincey3, congratulations, Rio Hatate. This award was never in doubt. Player of the month. And we had a good wee chat, Brian, you and I, beforehand, about the fact that well, it's twofold. You either watch the highlights of the game, you miss a hell of a lot of what actually happens and the contribution from various players. Just by watching it on the TV, you lose a lot of the contribution of a player like Maeda, who's doing so much off-the-ball work that's never picked up by the cameras. And you says to me you'd love for Hatate cam to be a thing, so that the camera just follows Hatate. Absolutely. And I said to you before, all the old Celtic archive games that I've now got on video, I've got, I think, about 200 videos to go through. I want to pick out all those amazing turns by Paul McStay that you never see because it didn't lead to a goal, or tackles by Danny McGrain that you never see because it never led to a goal, etc., or saves by Pat Bonner, for example, and go through these and actually compile them, because what YouTube has given us and what Twitter's given us is the ability to watch or create these highlights packages. And you were telling me that you've just recently watched the Hatate one. And that some of the moves, some of the play, some of the passing has just been astonishing, isn't it?
Oh, incredible stuff. And actually, so I remember when Hatate debuted, and being the sort of hyperbolic, overly excitable guy that I am, I said it was one of the best debuts I'd ever seen for a player. And I still stand by it, it was. And I think I remember saying, if he can keep his levels up, we've got an amazing player. But during his first season, especially towards to the end, he was a bit up and down. Even sometimes during games, he could be a wee bit up and down. But it seemed the past sort of month or so, maybe longer, he's actually been quite consistent through games. And after the game against them at the weekend, I was sort of flicking through and I was thinking about who was the man of the match in my head, and I was trying to sort of... So I started looking back, and I found just a highlights clip of Hatate for the year. And actually looking at it back now and looking at this year, I think, what a footballer. Yeah. Like, there's so many parts of his game that I didn't quite appreciate. Like, I didn't appreciate quite how strong he is and how hard he is to dispossess the ball. I mean, he's a unit. He's really hard to get off the ball. He's speed and work off the ball was sort of new. But it's particularly for our second goal, the way he takes that ball in midfield and just moves and just turns. Takes two of their players at the game and plays the ball through. Just tremendous and effortless. Yeah. And then he seems to know, him and Taylor, who again has been excellent this season, have just got such a good knowledge. And it's almost as if like they know someone has to be in a space. So if he doesn't see Taylor in it, he'll just go, and Taylor knows, well, Hatate's not there, I'll go in there. Maeda does the same. If you're an opposition player, that's terrifying to mark. And the fact that, Hatate, and I think Kyogo as well, but Hatate's been really vocal saying he's nowhere near the player he should be. He should be better. He wants to be better. That's incredible.
It's a frightening prospect, isn't it? It really is.
And I just think he's really, he's almost like Ange, almost like, I said it about the quadruple treble. I always think it's going to take us a few years before we actually appreciate what we've got and we've had there. And I think Hatate, even, today, I've got a newfound appreciation after rewatching some of this stuff. And that was without me thinking he was a top level player. So really, really special footballer.
No, without a doubt, I agree with that. I mean, it was an early shout, but I tipped him to be the player of the season, player of the year. There's been quite a few candidates in the Celtic team, but I think over the piece, Hatate is still the top of my list, particularly when you look at some of the individual brilliance in the big games, Brian, when he's a game changer. David Lowe has been on a Celtic State of Mind quite a few times. He's a friend of the show. And when, as I said earlier, when he talks about finances, you listen. And we had a really, really interesting discussion, actually. He's been in the studio, but we had a really interesting discussion during the pandemic as to how it's going to affect the finances of football clubs. And I think David and I both had this wee inkling that we wanted it to be a game changer in the landscape of where Celtic can play their football. That certainly hasn't transpired so far. If you haven't done so already, the original interview that I did with David Lowe, which was some years ago, is on the YouTube channel. It's an audio, but you can watch it on the YouTube channel or listen to it on the YouTube channel. Get onto our channel, subscribe, like this video, but search for the original David Lowe video. It was about 4 years ago. And he told the incredible tale of how Celtic were interested in buying Wimbledon Football Club, as it was then. I think the guy that ran it, I think the chairman was Sam Hammam at the time. And this was the original Crazy Gang. And they had a plan that if you bought Wimbledon, you could then change the crest of Wimbledon to the current Celtic crest. You could change the name to Celtic Football Club, and you could change your registered business address to Glasgow, and therefore play in the English Premier League. That was the plan. And they even did, they did a recce, if you like, by buying... what was the football club they bought in Scotland? Was it Clydebank? And it then applied to, play their home games in Ireland. Can you remember this? So they were going to do it with Clydebank as a Scottish club, but change the registration details to Dublin so that they could test the water, if you like, of a club being based in a different country but playing their football elsewhere, basically. After the World Cup in 1998, there was a massive meeting of all the top heads of all the federations and the authorities, and they rewrote the legislation to prevent Celtic and other clubs from doing that. That's how close we came to buying a football club in England and playing in English football way back then. And David tells that story in great detail. I'm obviously paraphrasing here 4 years on, so watch that. But David's been in the news again today, 29 years after the takeover, Brian. 29 years after the takeover. He was a financial advisor of Fergus McCann, who, of course, took over the club, rebuilt the stadium, gave our club back to the fans in relation to the share issue. And at that time, Fergus's goal and his vision was that it would be part ownership, if you like. So you would have the corporate ownership and the fan ownership. And you're looking for a 50-50 balance there. And that over the time, over the years, has more and more gone into the corporate ownership having more of a majority than the fans for various different reasons. But the Celtic Trust obviously tried to not put it right as such, but work to get the fan ownership a higher percentage of the shareholding, Brian, by basically setting up a situation where you can pay to the trust. I think it's a minimum of £5 a month, and nobody takes any money from that trust. They've got no employees. Basically, they're raising cash to buy shares. And the more shares they can buy, obviously, the more say they have in relation to the running of the football club. So David was talking about that today. There was a few other initiatives that they had. We spoke about it on the bulletin in relation to people who had become disconnected to their shares. So just by moving house, for example, or the inheritance of someone who's passed away, Brian, and those shares are almost dead shares, but, in effect, giving more power to someone like Dermot Desmond, who is the major shareholder at the club. And David's fear is that for some reason or other, even though Dermot Desmond has said this is not going to happen and he's going to keep them in his own family, that he might wake up one day and sell his shares, as many of these big English clubs have done, sold the family silver to faceless entities with loads of money. And David says, I just don't want to find that Dermot Desmond has sold his shareholding to the Qataris. And he's got a real fear about this, and he was speaking about it today. Brian, what's your take on that? I mean, I don't think David's fully invested in fan ownership as such. He has already spoken about, football clubs in Scotland, for example, being 2 postponed games away from a financial crisis. And many football clubs are in that position. Celtic are not, thankfully. But you just never know. I think the pandemic and the lockdown showed that even the biggest of companies and football clubs could be staring down, an empty vessel where you just got to pump money into it. And before you know it, you're not as rich as you once were. What's your take on this?
So a couple of things. I mean, I think it goes back to my earlier point about the Ferguson Law sort of attitude, where I know fans don't like to hear it, but it has to be run as a a sort of self-sustaining business. So I think, having that sort of corporate entity as well as the fans is really important, because you have to have people who can make the decisions just purely financial. And as a business, we're incredibly well run. We just are. Again, it's frustrating at times, but we really are. In terms of the ownership, I remember before, I can't remember what the subject was about, but I think we were talking about the City Group's interest in Celtic. And I said, you don't want Celtic to just be part of the City Group. And I think there's always that thing, and Jim and I have spoken about it on here a few times. We talk about the European Super League and stuff, and you go, well, yeah, you want Celtic to go to the next level, you want as much finances as possible, it'd be good to play in the Premier League, blah, blah, blah. But you also kind of want us to just be Celtic, and he wants to really retain what makes us us, and just being a sort of Qatari plaything, or some sort of American billionaire just here for a laugh. I don't know. It's sometimes it's better the devil Obviously, it's always nice to get a wee bit more investment, but yeah, you would be concerned if you started selling, 8%, or what is it you need to take over, 46% shares, something like that. I think you'd 46% shares going to the City Group or some Qatari-based consortium. I think that'd be a concern. In the short term, fans might go, well, there's plenty of money, and we'll be able to buy Modric and a free transfer and pay him the money for a year, and things like that. And it may advance the club to a degree, but it's always that sort of ideology versus sort of fiscal prudence and success. And the other thing that people need to remember as well is, just because you've got more money and you're a richer club doesn't necessarily guarantee success. And it, people, I mean, for an example, it sounds like a strange comparison, but if you look at that new retro top that's out, I think you and JP were talking about it yesterday.
Yeah,
that's a scandal. Like, no, it's disgusting, actually. It really, and it's a cracking top, but even on principle, whether you can afford that or not, it's really poor. Now, if we were Qatari owned, and we were playing players $300,000 a week, and they said, well, we're going to have to charge fans an extra £50 a season, a ticket or whatever, would people be comfortable with that? Is it only the tourists that can come in, and the rich tourists that can come in? Who become like Man United, and the actual half the guys that support Man United can't go, but there's guys from Taiwan and Dubai sitting in the front seats, the half and half scarves. There's a real danger of that for me. It does give me the slight fear, and maybe it's cynical, but I think it's something to consider.
You're right, and it's like people going about brand management, Brian, right? And Celtic are a huge brand, but you've also got to retain your identity as a football club, which is different. And I think that's where Celtic come into that category. And I remember, obviously, with the Newcastle takeover, thinking back to the numerous times I've been at St James's Park, not as a Newcastle fan, just because I enjoyed it as a weekend and as a football day out and all that kind of stuff. And the fanaticism of the Newcastle fans, I loved that. I really did. And I did wonder how they would, the majority of them, if the takeover results in success, they don't care where the money comes from, right? But there will be a hardcore who are thinking, where's the identity of our football club? But it will only be a hardcore, because success seems to just mask a lot of that. It masks a million sins and deficiencies of.
And I think it's one of those success. Things. It's one of those things. Like, I mean, Celtic in particular, and maybe it's ego, but I always feel like we're different. But we're just Celtic's just kind of a different club. It's a different mentality. It's a different thing, and I would hate to be in that position, if I'm honest, where you sort of feel it's no longer. It's like going to a wee chip shop that two of the neighbours own, and it gets taken over by a big franchise, and it's still the same name, but it's not the same chip shop.
Yeah,
it's a crazy comparison, but that would be my worry. And it's not that I don't want investment. It's not that I don't want the club to move forward and stuff, but I think you stop being a Celtic that a lot of us know and have known growing up. And part of Celtic's sort of attraction is the underdog aspect. It is that sort of, you're kind of the outsiders. I think Xavi done that famous quote where he said, like Barcelona, Catalan, and Celtic, they're outsiders in their own country, and they're kind of always up against it. And and yet, despite that, we're incredibly successful. and we do all this sort of thing. And even, the wee supporters club in there, Swindon Shamrocks, I know Acsom, Green Oak CSC, all the CSCs do loads and loads of charity work off their own back. None of us are millionaires. And we do these things because it's an ethos of being part of Celtic. It's kind of the club. And would that be the same if, it was 120 quid a ticket for a game and we're paying 350 quid to players? I'm not convinced it would be, if I'm honest. And maybe that's overly cynical, maybe it's overly romantic, but I just don't think it'd be the same thing.
No, I don't think it is over romantic. There is a romanticism about Celtic. I mean, the ticker tape it down the bottom of this video, download the Glory in the Dream. Why did we do that? That's because we're raising funds for the birthplace of the club. Now, if the club were paying 300 grand a week for a player, yet they couldn't ensure the maintenance of the birthplace of the football club, then I'd have an issue with that, because you're losing your identity as a football club then. It's all about brand, it's all about money, it's all about profit. And at the moment, I think the club are striking a decent balance. I think the connection between the fans and the football club right now is very, very healthy. That was one of the biggest criticisms we had, Brian, in the season where we failed to win the 10th consecutive league title. Is there was an issue there. There was a real issue in terms of the club and the fans, and that relationship had broken down. But that comes down to the individuals within the football club as well, and that's where you start talking about a culture within a club. So yeah, very interesting comments by David, and hopefully at some point in the not too distant future, David will come back on the Celtic State of Mind and we can talk about that as well. Yosarian, a very good evening from Abalmy, far north Queensland. Girls and boys, hail, hail. I love hearing where the viewers are sitting watching the show. And Keith, as always, hello from Plymouth. And we've also got JR, good evening from West Australia. Yeah, hope everybody is enjoying us. Another thing that we have mentioned before, everybody knows, by the way, you shouldn't really mention food at this time of the day, Brian, because you've just mentioned chips, and now I'm thinking about a chip butty with a pickled egg and brown sauce. You shouldn't do that. JP does it sometimes on a Thursday. I wasn't planning on eating anything today, but
Listen, I'm trying to watch what I'm eating, so I'm trying to stay off carbs where possible, right? And on the way home I flew back from Glasgow during the week, and as I was getting to Central, the first time there was a guy standing with chips for the chip at Central Station. I killed him because I was instantly starving, and that's all I could think about the whole way home. So I feel your pain, and I thought I'd share it, because I think if I'm suffering, might as well make you suffer as well.
You're going to share that, thank you. But one of the things I've mentioned, and again, it came up in conversation yesterday, as you said, with JP, merchandise is a massive part of a football club, and I actually love merchandise. I love the old school stuff. I love the new designs. It comes out. There needs to be a wide range. They don't expect every fan to buy everything. There needs to be a wide range, and I totally get that, because modern football is completely transformed the way that fans purchase merchandise and invest in the club in other ways. It's a massive part, and we're very good at it. You can tell that when you look at the accounts. When it comes to the football jerseys, there's obviously been a slight disconnect recently for me, because I'm a massive fan, hence the reason I've done so much research into the history of the Celtic shirts. But I'm not a massive fan of the third kit. And I don't mean the design of the third kit. I just mean the fact that there is a third kit. I'm not a massive fan of that. And I know that, kind of early in the 1980s, mid-80s, we started introducing a third kit. Now, there were some occasions in the past, it's all in the history of the Celtic jersey book, where we found ourselves in a scenario, Brian, where we're playing a team, there's going to be a clash, often in Europe, and we had to get like an emergency kit. And that's what happened with that beautiful white kit that we wore against Saint Etienne. It was just all white, and there's a couple of green hoops on the cuffs and on the neck. Beautiful. It reminded me, Jinky, of the Real Madrid strip. But it was an emergency, and Umbro had to give us this new kit, and that happened a couple of times. But you can't plan for that, because you don't know you're going to draw Saint Etienne in Europe. But what annoys me is where we release 2 and sometimes 3 kits, and you think to yourself, well, what are we going to wear against Hibs? What are we going to wear against clubs that there's going to be a kit clash? And that's where the financial aspect of it and the profitable aspect of it overrides, the fan engagement and the fact that we're trying to give good merchandise. So my suggestion was always that the third kit is pretty much obsolete some seasons. I mean, the silver one, right? We're playing St Mirren this weekend, and we will get to the game, by the way. We've worn it once, It was the last time we went to Paisley, right? We've worn that kit on one occasion, and that was when we played St Mirren at Paisley. And by the way, it was probably not the kit we should be wearing, because it was barely, they said, I said I've got bad eyesight, but I thought there was a bit of a clash wearing the grey kit. If we go through the whole this season, don't wear it again, it means we've worn it once. So what was the point in that even being there? It was the same with the silver with the pink chevron. We never wore it. Not one time did we wear that jersey. And we very rarely wore strips like the pink one, the all pink one, etc., which apparently was a nod back to the European Cup final ticket. Quite, come on now, that's a tenuous link to wearing a pink strip. Anyway, my point is, if we are going to have a third kit, and I've accepted that in the modern game we probably are, why don't we do something charitable with it? That's my point. And my point was that we should do a blackout kit like they have done with various teams all over Europe. So basically, you can still have a different design, Brian, different sponsor, different manufacturer, whatever, but everything on it is black. And the reason we would do that is it would take the place of the black armband when, sadly, one of the figures within our club's history passes away, which sadly, but inevitably happens year on year. There is always people passing away from the Celtic family, and we wear the black armband. And my take on it is, well, why don't we always have a blackout kit? We wear it as a mark of respect for those who pass on. And it's not done for profit, Brian. Sales of the kit go to the Former Players Association, and it goes to the families of those who have passed on. And it helps them, because that's what we're all about. That's the roots of our family, right? The Celtic family and the club. So that was always my take on it. So yesterday I was reading, and I found it very interesting that Celtic goalkeepers may be wearing, or we're only going to have one goalkeeper, the Celtic goalkeeper may be wearing a black kit against St Mirren. And it's in honour to the legendary Athletic Bilbao goalkeeper, Jose Angel Iribar. Hopefully I got that right, because he turned 80 on the 1st of March. And that's fantastic, and that's fabulous. And if we do it, brilliant. All about that. But we had a goalkeeper who, at the age of 22, died 92 years ago. And I think that it would be great if Celtic, every single year in September, wore the blackout kit as a tribute in honour to Johnny Thompson. And then others that pass. And as I say, the money generated from sales goes to the Former Players Association. And it helps guys who actually, maybe in their older age, never made much money from football, who need to go for a hip replacement, Brian, or need to fight addiction issues, or might even find themselves homeless, And then the widows of the great players that we've had in the past, who we celebrate all the time, who probably aren't that well off and could be doing with a helping hand. That's my pitch. I think it should be a charity jersey, the third kit at Celtic. It should not be for commercial gain. What's your take on it?
So, I mean, it's hard to disagree with you on that. I think it was beautifully put, and I think something that most people get on board with. It actually goes back to the previous point, though, when we spoke about the sort of charitable links with Celtic. And you mentioned the relationship between the sort of the fans and the board is better, and it's probably masked, as to your previous point, by the success we're having now, because everyone's kind of nicer now, right? Everyone's kind of on board. But then we talk about St Mary's, and you think, well, I mean, Acsom done more to repair the St Mary's roof than Celtic did. That's a fact. That's no blown smoke. That's no bigging ourselves up. That's a reality, and that's where Celtic fall down. And the idea of having a third kit for charity, I think, would be excellent, and I think it's something they should be doing, but they won't. I mean, there's various obvious things. I mean, the fact that Lennoxtown's not called the Tommy Burns Academy or training bar still blows my mind. It's the easiest of easy wins. So there is a lot of things that could be improved, and we could be doing, and perhaps should be doing, and I think that would be one of them. But if you ask me if I think it's realistic that will happen, I've got to sadly say no, I don't, because I mean, we're talking about releasing a fourth kit this year, and it's March. I mean, that's madness to me. I mean, that stuff, I think, a bit of awareness of what's going on in the world.
Exactly. Imagine bringing it out before my book signed off.
I know. I was aghast, Paul.
You know what I mean? So that book is complete, and then you bring another jersey in just to throw a spanner in the works.
I think it's the only reason they've done it. To be honest, they probably saw one of the podcasts last year, they're getting criticised and they're raging. But no, but in a serious note, people are in financial peril now, and but releasing a fourth kit in March. And you just think, come on, there's got to be a better way of doing this. So yeah, I do agree with you. I think it'd be a good idea, but I don't see it happening.
No, you're right, because, and the thing is with that as well, though, Brian, is that if you were to do that in support of your ex-players, I'd be much more likely to buy it. You know, this is the thing that they don't get. You know, is that the third kit's always one of these things. I bet they had 15,000 of the grey and pink ones lying in a bunker somewhere underneath the Celtic Superstore because nobody bought it. At least if there was a point to it.
How much was that pink kit? Say 45 quid, 50 quid, right? Yeah. Now, you've got to imagine they maybe only sell 10% of their overall stock of that because nobody bought it, right? So that's a 90% loss in terms of stock. So say they did a charity top that you're talking about and said, well, we'll take 50% for business costs, 50% for charity, and we'll charge you 40 quid for it. You can guarantee they'd sell 60% of their talk. So even though they're only taking half, they're still making considerably more than they're losing on just a random third or fourth kit.
Yeah.
So it does make it, there is a way to make it viable from a business perspective. There is a way to spin it and say, look, you're doing something for charity, and you're making a bit of money, and you're no fleecing punters. It's a win-win. But that joined up thinking is something that is lacking. And I go back to the Tommy Burns point about that. I remember when Peter Law came in as chairman, and I was rinsed because I said I thought it was a really good idea. And I said one of the easiest things he could do to get people on side was get that name changed. And it's just simple things like that I don't think it's considered enough. So I say they could literally have their cake and eat it with that third strip, the charity strip, no problem, and still make money. There's a way to do it viably and make it attractive for fans. And by the way, we know people for Celtic watch, so there's a pitch for you. You can still make some money off it, but you're still keeping the club ethos, and I think the fans would be on board.
And it becomes something that can be used, Brian. An all black kit on the occasion that you're playing teams where there's a colour clash. You wear that jersey, and it's going to be usable. That's a big thing.
Just before we move on, when you've got causes for a lot of ex-players, like Chris Sutton's dad and the dementia and stuff, and these things, see, there's other things to raise awareness, and you're wearing a black kit, you're not wearing the famous hoops. If someone doesn't know why, they're going to go, why are they wearing the black today? Well, this is why. Bang. You've instantly just raised a bit more awareness than you had. Even if it's at a micro level, you're still doing it. So it's still a talking point. It's still something to raise awareness, even with the financial aspects of it. So there's another thing you could do there as well.
Could we always wear it against Rangers as well? Right.
Well, they'll be mourning. They'll still be wearing black. They'll still be mourning this week, I'd imagine. Be mourning their finances, be mourning the lack of trophies.
Absolutely. Paddy, Vital Celtic. Paddy is on a Wednesday. Check him out on the socials. Juranovic claiming he left because we signed Alistair Johnston is bizarre. We all know why he left. Why try and rewrite it? This is the thing with regards to Juranovic. We knew he wanted to leave. And we knew he wanted to leave before Alistair Johnston came in. So that's a decent point by Paddy. Because it was on the, that was part of the Acsom chat way back in the summer. And Fabrizio Romano, is that his name? Yes. Fabrizio Romano, yeah. He mentioned it as well. Saying that, that's him. That's the guy. Yeah, absolutely, with the emojis. So the chat had been ongoing for months and months before AJ arrived. By the way, though, before I do move on to the St Mirren game, let's have a wee chat about Alistair Johnston. What a performance against Rangers, by the way. He was superb. Brilliant.
It's funny. I remember when he first joined, and he was such a sort of affable presence, and he was talking about how he likes the physical aspect of it and how he was really strong and aggressive. And I looked at him and I thought, you don't look that strong. Wow, was I wrong? He's almost got that Scott Brown thing where he's really wiry, but he's just so powerful and barrels into people. And I thought his performance, if it wasn't for Hatate's excellence, and I think Moy could have been in for a shout as well, because he can't underestimate his influence in the game. But I thought Alistair Johnston was superb. Like that he instantly made himself memeable when he just took the ball off Kent, shoved Barisic at the road, and then done a big diagonal. Brilliant, just effortless, brilliant. I think it was that Cholak done something in the touchline and he was there giving it to him, and I loved that. And even actually, the only thing I'd criticised Johnston about was I'd like to see him cross more. And then one of the crosses he put in for Kyogo, who just headed over wide. It's absolutely sensational. So, and the thing is, we need to remember as well, he's only come in a couple of months.
Yeah.
And he's really, really landed right in. And I remember him saying sometimes he played in a back three. And again, at first I thought, I'm not sure about you, but actually you can really buy him as that aggressive sort of ball winning centre back as well. So tremendous player, tremendous attitude, and it's funny how we've got two right backs that are a bit like that, because I think Ralston always gives you that in a game.
He does.
That strength, that sort of attitude, that we bit about him. I think they say is the nice way of putting it. And I know people have been saying we lack that in the team, and I don't think we lack the physical side. I think that's overrated, but I do think there's maybe a nastiness missing. But Johnson looks as if he's got a bit of bite, shall we say? He's not going to be.
No, he's not. This is the thing as well. That aggression that he's got and Ralston's got, it's not about being a dirty player. Being combative and actually enjoying that part of the game, enjoying going toe-to-toe with somebody in terms of the aggression. Because there was a few times somebody made a video, one of the usual suspects on Twitter, where they put the Exorcist music to him as he was walking away with this look on his face as if he was enjoying the fact that, he was absolutely getting stuck in. And I do think, particularly domestically, that sometimes you've just got to, you've got to have that grit. And if you're getting it from your right back, superb. Also, I've just got to shout out that, Twitter has gone into meltdown today because there was a picture he just sent out with Carol Starfelt, the big gorgeous man, Carol Starfelt, and everybody's gone into meltdown. I mean, what's that all about? Mikey Johnson has opted.
I thought Starfelt was excellent as well.
It was.
Actually, I know he made a couple of mistakes kind of under the ball in the space like a minute or so, but I think, Carter Vickers is the Rolls Royce, we know that. But I thought Starfelt was excellent, because actually when I sort of rewatched the game, which I was explaining to you, I don't tend to rewatch full games, and apart from the fact I was chuckling away at myself at some of the things during the game and some of the reactions, because I've watched interviews before and some of Ian Beale's comments, and it was sort of brilliant to watch. But there was so many bits where Starfelt just dealt with the ball under pressure so well, just took it. Again, brush past people, move forward. It was really, really impressive from him, actually. And I'm can be critical of him, not in terms of his defensive side, because I think he's excellent, but sometimes he's passing. But he was so composed for the back, and he had wee Huffy Bob next to him trying to kick him at every opportunity and never batted an eyelid. So a really, really excellent performance actually from him.
No, it was. I mean, the point you're talking about is probably 30 seconds. It's a tiny wee part of the game where there was a couple of moments, as you like.
Gaffes.
A couple of gaffes. But other than that, I thought he was outstanding. I was also interested to read yesterday that Mikey Johnson has opted to play for Ireland. He's a player that is currently out on loan in Portugal, and he's doing pretty well out there. I spoke about the 12 Celtic players who are out on loan at the moment. This is the big thing as well. People are going on about bloated squads and, the Celtic squad. Not quite, actually, right? Because we do have, if you bring the 12 loanees back into the fold, we do have a squad that really needs trimmed. And you hope that many, if not all of them, will leave the club. No, nothing personal. It's just that if they're not going to contribute to Celtic and Ange's progression in his pursuit of greatness, then they do have to go somewhere else. And one of the guys that's out on loan at the moment, but he does have a decent length of contract at Celtic, is Mikey Johnson. And he's a guy that obviously played the underaged football with Scotland, but he has opted to play for Ireland. And Stephen Kenny has been out to watch him as well. But the big question for me, Brian, if you were to look at the 12 guys out on loan, is he one that there's still a flicker of hope that he might come back and play for Celtic?
Possibly, maybe, only because Ange seemed to quite like him. But I think if he had to have a bit more experience, but if I'm honest, I don't see us moving forward with him. I think the only players that are going to be coming into Celtic are players that are going to take us forward, whether that's in a year's time, in the case of Kobayashi and O, or right now, in the case of guys like Moy coming in. I think anyone that's going to come to the club is going to improve what's there. And I don't think, if you look at Haksabanovic, Shota, Abada, Forrest, even young Vata, would you replace any of them with Michael Johnson now? No. So I don't see him being a big asset. And I said before, out of all the players that are out on loan, I don't think any of them have got a future at Celtic. The one that I thought may have would have been Montgomery, but just because he played quite well under Ange at first. But again, is he better than Bernabe or Taylor? I don't think so. And I think whoever we are signing has to be better than what we've got. And that's why I think, guys like Joe Hart, who's been excellent, Starfelt, who's been excellent for us. These are guys that we may actually look to replace.
Yeah.
Just to take us just up to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
There's anything wrong with them just now, but just being good enough isn't enough for Ange. I think he's always looking to how can we be better. What's those marginal? What's that extra 10% we can get in and make us that bit better? And I don't think he's going to be particularly sentimental if he has to replace a Joe Hart or a Starfelt or even a Kyogo if it came to it.
I'm going to link this into something Martin O'Neill said on Saturday, but before I do that,
Martin.
Oh, your buddy, aye. If you look at the situation where we've got 12 players out on loan at the moment, Brian, and I welcome anybody to argue around the futures of James McCarthy, Connor Hazard, Stephen Welsh, who are currently at the club, we could be looking at something of a mass exodus of players. That's 15 players there now. Toby Oluwayemi, I reckon, will come back to Celtic. Montgomery, I think, will come back to Celtic. There's maybe an argument about Mikey Johnson, but other than that, you're looking at a dozen players in the summer who could be looking for a new. That's a massive amount of players, huge. So the rebuild continues, the evolution of the squad continues. But the point you just made there in relation to there being a pushing standard. What you've seen, I think, and I pitched this to Martin, what you've seen when he came in was there was a batch of players that he brought in that just took everything to another level. And I think they were supplemented by the likes of Lambert, Moravchik, and Petrov and Larson and Mialbi and these guys who were already at the club, Brian. And it just took us to that other level. But there was a feeling as a Celtic fan that in order to take it to another level again, maybe a couple of seasons after Seville, you needed that batch of players again, that level, that standard of player to come back into the club again, 4 or 5 of them, because they'd all kind of aged and to a point where there was no real selling value. I mean, we never made any money other than on, and he wasn't part of that group, but other than Petrov, that team, did we really sell any of them for big money? I don't think so. No, so
I think a lot of free transfers and the contracts and stuff.
Sutty, Lenny, Big Hartson, Tomo, even Larson, we didn't sell them for big money. And, that group of players aged all this, I don't mean at the same time, everybody ages at the same time, but they all got to that age whereby maybe we needed another batch of 4 or 5 players. And Martin O'Neill spoke about the fact the club weren't going down that route again. They weren't going to be bringing in 6 million players on big wages from the Premiership down south. Otherwise, who knows what might have happened at that time. But I think there needed to be a period of, some people call it downsizing, but when Strachan came in, there definitely was a completely different strategy, whereby instead of buying Bellamy, we buy Zuraski and Nakamura and Boric, so we get 3 for 1. And it worked for Strachan, and it worked in Europe for Gordon Strachan as well. So absolutely, I think that the evolution and the revolution under Ange has only just begun, and I think there's going to be massive changes in the summer.
I totally agree. I think that, as well as the sort of players leaving we spoke about, I think some of the first team guys, as I said, I mentioned Joe Hart and maybe guys at Starfelt, I think they might be replaced as well. And I think that's, again, Andrew spoke about this and he's been quite clear that it's going to be a sort of an evolving and revolving door of players. You get new players in to keep it going and keep that momentum going and keep improving. And when he says about we never stop, I don't think it's just about the players. I think it's about that process of improvement. It's about, if you look at it the way he talks about training, if training gets too easy, he changes it. If players don't like exhausted after training, he changes it, makes it harder, changes his coaching setup, moves coaches around, gets somebody else in. He always wants things to improve, and I think it's just something we have to get used to. And as I said at the start, I think he's got credit in the bank for it now, where even if, say we keep Ange for another 4 years, right, which would be lovely, at some point within that, there will be a period where we need to, get in a bunch of players at the time. And Whereas I think under Ange, so I mean, traditionally, if you get a manager for that length of time, like Mark O'Neill, you have to sort of rejig it. Whereas I think Ange just keep doing it every year, so it's almost keeps going. So you never really have like one rebuild. You just constantly improve every single year all the time without having to get 10 players in the window again.
No, we've spoken again about, Ange Postecoglou's tenure at Celtic, and, it would be a dream for me if he continued even after he steps down, if you like, as the first team coach or the manager, because I just think that to have somebody in the building like him beyond that, so that there is this continuity, Brian, of approach, mentality, philosophy, style, recruitment strategy, and it continues. It doesn't just happen because he's in the building, and as soon as he goes, somebody else comes in, there's new ideas. It's got to continue. Let's look ahead to St Mirren, the only team that we know domestically, the only team that has taken 3 points off Celtic. We can't blame the jerseys, unfortunately. Guys like Moy are different beasts now to what they were back then. But credit to Robinson when you look at what he's done with provincial clubs. I don't think fans of Motherwell and St Mirren mind being called provincial clubs. What he's done is he's maximised Motherwell when he was a manager there. He's maximised St Mirren. I know that he's been spoken about in terms of the Aberdeen job. Wouldn't surprise me if he went there. Obviously, he knows Alan Burrows pretty well, and I think he's got a right good side at St Mirren. They're not going to be easy to beat. And I think that from now to the end of the season, we're not going to have that week, Brian, where we think, 3 or 4 guys are going to sit this one out. We're not going to get that from now to the end of the season with Ange. Full strength squad every single game.
Yeah, and it kind of as it should be. But the interesting thing is, even when our squad's so strong. Like again, you watched the game at the weekend, which was obviously tremendous. But we brought on Matt O'Reilly, who's got the most assists in the league, off the bench for the last 25 minutes. I mean, that's insane. That's an insane quality depth. The guys, David Turnbull didn't even get on. We're so strong that you can rotate a bit, and it doesn't dilute the quality. I think the system is strong enough. But yeah, agreed. I think that there's no rest on the laurels. I don't think we can underestimate St Mirren. I think we've done it once and we get, our backsides felt. I think we would obviously put them out the cup, but what Stevie Robertson's done is a bit like what David Martindale's done at Livingston, is that they sort of optimised what they've got and they know how to use it well and they stick to it. And that's their version of Ange Ball, right? It's horrible to watch, but it suits and it brings with success. And St Mirren are good at that. Robertson was good at it at Motherwell, so it's not going to be easy. But it's not just Moy that's better. I think as a team, I think every individual in that team has improved. I don't think there's anyone that's went backwards. And I see we mentioned Hatate at the start. I think Hatate's at a level of consistency now that he's probably fair to say he's our best player. I think technically. And I include Kyogo in that as well. I just think Hatate's there's something quite special about him. And I think the rest of the squad have all got better. I don't think there's anyone, and even O'Reilly, I know he's not been playing as much, but that's because of how good Moy's been. But I think O'Reilly's probably still a better player. He would have been then as well. So I've no doubt we can see it out because we're better, but I don't think we can sort of relax. And I don't imagine I think if Ange sees a player relaxing and sort of strolling through training, I suspect it'll be a very rude awakening.
Absolutely. I'm going to go 2-0 Celtic, Brian. That's my prediction for Sunday. 2-0 Celtic. It's not going to be easy, but we've got enough quality and creativity to get through that game. And a few more comments before we wrap up for the day. Ewan Boy Martin comes in with Ange in charge. We will keep getting better and better. Europe, get ready for a shock. It will be interesting to see how we perform next year in European football. Peter McGee, Mr. Steen was ruthless. He absolutely was. And even his ex-players still call him Mr. Steen, which I think shows the respect in which he is held. The ruthlessness, says Keimatsu, is what he demands from his players. And I think he has instilled that ruthlessness within the team. I think you've got it now in Callum McGregor. I think McGregor has got that ruthlessness about him, Brian. And you were talking about a nastiness that sometimes you need when they go and get stuff, or if the opposition's trying to bully you, or maybe try and be a bit aggressive for you. And I think McGregor, did he have it before? I don't think we've seen it as often as we've seen it since Ange's come in. Maybe the captaincy, leading by example, showing the rest of the guys, but particularly the new guys, what you've got to do against a lot of these teams. Stamp your authority. Scott Brown was brilliant at it as well. And that's not being dirty. And I think Callum McGregor has maybe added that to his game as well. We've got Donny Boy coming in. He's going to go for 2-0, but if it's an early goal, 3 or 4, I get what you mean there, because if it opens up, then it can be anything. And that goes against just about every team in the league, actually, if we get that early goal. One final question for you, Brian. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments section. Kyogo's on 24 goals. He's got a potential 15 games to go. How many goals can he get this season?
40.
You want to go for 40?
I want to go for 40 because I just think he's another player that's getting better as well. I think through a very slight dip, just relative to his previous levels, he was still performing well, just not as well. But I think he's back to where he was. I think he's so clever, and his movement's brilliant. His confidence is high. I think everyone's fitness is getting better. So the more the team's more dynamic, he's going to get fed more. And I can see him getting a couple of hat tricks in that time as well. I think he scores about a goal a game anyway. So you're probably, if that continues, you're probably looking at nearly 40 anyway, 39. But I suspect he'll get a couple of doubles, so I think you'll be looking at 40.
If he does that,
Scottish Cup and the thing, I take it obviously, but I mean, tremendous. And he's maybe another player that I don't think will quite really appreciate how good until years from now.
Uncle Nobby Steamboat agrees with you. Now, if he does, I wasn't being rude by being on my phone. I was having a wee look at one of my wee notes here. If he was to score 40, this is the group of players that he would be joining in the list of Celtic players who have scored 40 or more goals in a season. Jimmy McGrory did it a few times. Did Jimmy? He liked the goal. He liked the goal. Henrik Larsson again did it a few times. McGrory scored 57, 53, 50, 42. Henrik Larsson scored 53. Let me check. 41 and 41. You also had Charlie Nicholas scored 48 goals in season 82-83. Joe McBride scored 43 in 65-66. Bobby Lennox scored 41, as did Kenny Dalglish and Brian McClare. And Lee Griffiths was the last player to join that esteemed group of players. He scored 40 goals in 2015-16 under Ronnie Dyler. So if he does it, he's joining a fair old group of goal scorers there in the Celtic history books. Brian Degnan, last weekend was tremendous. I've still had a day off, so I'm going to have one off tomorrow, and I'll be back on the bulletin for the pre-match on Sunday. I've got to thank everybody for your continued support. It's fabulous, the amount of support that we get. It's brilliant as well, Brian, getting out there and seeing people in the flesh and in person. So thanks everybody for getting involved. If you want to help us further, give us a big thumbs up on the YouTube video and subscribe to the channel. We're giving away 2 VIP tickets for the Wim Jansen tribute night on the 12th of May. You could come along and see some of the heroes of the Smell the Glove season. And obviously we've had a few interviews, and we'll have a few more with players from that squad. So if you want to be in with a chance to win those tickets, just subscribe to our channel. All that's left for me to say is thank you once again, Brian Degnan, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.